We say, well, because you were good at sales, you'll probably be a great sales manager. So we make them a sales manager with no training, no support, no understanding, and we throw them into the pool and are like, do your best to swim, and they're drowning.
How is the employer assessing? How's the employer accepting? How's the employer accomplishing? What's the employer's goals for accomplishing? As opposed to what's the employee's experience?
So I want the employee to stay for a decade, but I'm an at-will employer and I can fire you on a whim tomorrow. Well, wait a second. Which is it? You're expecting me to give all of my time, effort, and talent to this endeavor, but I could come to work tomorrow and be fired? I'm not a fan of going back to the old way. I want it to be the way it has evolved in the last few years. So many of the young people today looked at the hours their parents put in, they look at the commitment and the loyalty their parents showed, only to be fired without receiving the proverbial golden watch, only to be let go days or weeks or months before retirement and not getting access to pensions, only to have pension funds raided and not invested in. All these things that we as corporations, as organizations did in the previous generations, finally the younger generations are saying, yeah, I'm not interested in playing that game. And let's be candid, why did we even establish 9 to 5 as the working hours? Because that's when the sun was up.
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. The expectations of employees have changed. Okay, you may like that, you may not like that. You may think it should be, you may think it's not should be, but it means that in effect, you're going to need to change the way you manage, and how you were managed is not what's going to work. All right. The thing we want to say for today is what really are these new expectations and what's reasonable about them, what's not reasonable. How do you manage your best talent in a way that makes them want to stay even just a little bit longer? How do you become the employer or the manager of choice? Because if you're the employer manager of choice, that means it's easier to recruit talent. It's easier to keep them a little bit longer. It's easier to get more out of them. And the ultimate question is, what is a struggling manager to do, given that all of you have plenty on your plate already? So my guest today is Joey Coleman. Joey helps companies keep their employees and their customers. He's an award-winning speaker. He shares his first 100 days methodology for improving customer and employee retention with organizations around the world, like Whirlpool, Volkswagen Australia, Zappos. That's just a small smidgen of the places that he's been. His 2 books have gotten major acclaim. Both were instant Wall Street Journal bestsellers, and they are Never Lose a Customer Again, To Turn Any Sale into a Lifelong Customer, and the latest one, Never Lose an Employee Again, which is the one that we're talking about today. So Joey, welcome to the conversation.
Wanda, thank you so much for the kind invitation. And thanks to everybody listening in. I am super excited to get some time together.
I'm super excited to hear it. I think it's good. I'm just like enthusiastic. All right. So let me start with the first obvious question here, which is, you're a specialist in customer experience and in employee experience. For the record, why both?
Well, although many organizations, I think, Wanda, see customer experience and employee experience as 2 totally different things, I see them as 2 sides of the same coin. As you improve the customer experience, it becomes easier to be an employee working for that organization. If the employees are happy, they're delivering to happier customers. And so the 2 elements of those interaction feed on each other. And I think the umbrella that unites both of them is the fact that humans are humans are humans are humans. And the things that make a customer excited are often the same things that would make an employee excited, and vice versa. And so if we think about a framework, a methodology for creating these experiences, we should be able to apply it externally to our customers, but also internally to our team members or our employees.
Right. Okay, I'm going to give you a very visible example of this one that I experience every time I go to my local grocery store. So I'm not going to name the name. Everybody will know it, but I will tell you it starts with a T. Okay. You go in that store, it is jam-packed. The other customers there drive me bananas. But the checkout experience is as smooth as like running a train set. It's just brilliantly smooth. Everybody's on point. Everybody is happy. And I keep going. It's a good place, but I keep going because my experience in the checkout is so good. It's not because the store is great. It's because the employees at checkout are fantastic. There you go. They get my business because of that. They didn't have that? Nah.
Absolutely. And I would be willing to bet that they make a significant investment as an organization in teaching those team members how to effectively navigate checkout, which, if we think about it, the grocery store is about two things: finding what you want in the store and getting it out of the store back to your home. Like that, these are literally the two main elements of why someone would go to a grocery store. You know, they're both necessary evils in many ways. How do I find what I'm looking for in the store? And then once I get it, how do I pay for it so that I can take it home?
Yeah, right. Okay, two places to work. All right. I'm with you, though. I think that when the employees are happy, customers are happy, everybody feels it in some way. All right. So now I opened with this notion that I believe that how managers need to manage is not how they were managed. So anything about the old rules are gone. But I'm interested in your statement. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? What are you seeing?
I absolutely agree that the old way of working with a team, working with an organization, leading people, was built on, in many ways, more of a factory model of, well, as long as we are effective, as long as we are efficient, as long as we produce more tomorrow than we produce today, we are #winning at life. Mm-hmm. The problem is a couple of things. Number one, it never worked that well in the beginning. All right. So before we even get to talk about what has happened in recent years, let's not delude ourselves to believing that it used to be working fabulously. And I think there are some fundamental elements of that, one of which is even just the concept of managing. I don't know any human being on the planet who wakes up in the morning and says, super excited to be managed today. No one wants to be managed. We are autonomous human beings. We like to think that we're in charge, that we're making our own decisions, that we are exercising our free will. Now, obviously, within the ecosystem of an organization, we need to have alignment. We need to have everyone moving in similar directions. But I have a tendency to skew more towards, while your title may be manager, your job is leader, right? And the difference between those two words is, to me, a manager is about saying, here are the rules, make sure you follow them. A leader is about saying, here's where we're going, come with me. And so I think that's the difference. And I think what happened during the pandemic is that it really forced the hand in a lot of organizations because we didn't have the command and control of everybody sitting in a cubicle with a manager lording over them or looking over the crowd. People were sent home and people started to exercise more of their choices of how they spend their day and how they spend their time. And they got used to it, and I don't blame them. And now as we think about return to office initiatives and more people, quote unquote, getting back to the office, we're in a scenario where people are saying, wait, I'm not a fan of going back to the old way. I want it to be the way it has evolved in the last few years.
Well, I also think we have a younger generation coming through who said, wait a minute, I've been able to do my school and university and work anywhere, anytime, in any way. It doesn't need to be 9 to 5 or 8 to 3 or whatever the numbers are. When I get it done, I get it done. I get it done to a deadline, and I can work in a coffee shop. I can work in the office. I can work anywhere. They're used to more freedoms. And I also think they've watched what's happened with their parents and say, I don't want that to deal.
Absolutely, Wanda. And I think you're right in both counts. I think most organizations are drastically underestimating your second point, which is so many of the young people today looked at the hours their parents put in. They look at the commitment and the loyalty their parents showed, only to be fired without receiving the proverbial golden watch, only to be let go days or weeks or months before retirement and not getting access to pensions, only to have pension funds raided and not invested in. All these things that we as corporations, as organizations did in the previous generations. Finally, the younger generations are saying, yeah, I'm not interested in playing that game. And let's be candid. Why did we even establish 9 to 5 as the working hours? Because that's when the sun was up. I mean, literally, how archaic is our system that, like, I know, let's have everybody be at work once there's daylight, and they'll work here until the daylight goes away. We electrified our offices and our factories decades ago, over 100 years ago. And we're in this situation where people are like, oh, but it still should be 9 to 5. I'm sorry, the planet isn't operating 9 to 5. Our businesses don't need to be operating 9 to 5.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we create shift work for that, but it's the same dedication of I have to have this dedicated block of time, which is an inefficient way to work. I have one last thing to say about the younger generation too, which I think is really important. I think they, unlike any other generation starting work, recognize that time is their most significant commodity. There are so many things to do with my time, and I see what I could do with my time on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever else is the favorite at the moment. All these people having these wonderful experiences that they want to have. Time really matters to them. So,
absolutely.
And so I'm not willing to waste my time or use my time poorly at work. And I think if you keep that thing straight, it's actually, we all sort of feel that way.
I agree. And I think in some ways it's a double-edged sword, because in that same desire to use time effectively and enjoy our time, I think younger generations also have not had as much downtime where there wasn't something happening. You know, if you look at young kids today, you know, the concept of I'm bored or, you know, I need to be on my phone. Why? Because I want the dopamine hits. I want the constant entertainment, the constant flash, the constant activity. And that is not something that, you know, in my generation growing up that we had. I mean, that was, you know, if you after school, what did you do? Well, you hoped that maybe some of the other kids in the neighborhood were also home for school and wanted to play, or else you entertained yourself. When you think about TV, when I was growing up, the TV had 4 channels: ABC, CBS, NBC, and then PBS. Those were the 4 channels. Now there are 4,000 channels, and they're 24/7 programming, and their entire channels devoted to certain ages and certain demographics. We're at a time that is unprecedented in human history, and I think that's impacting our beliefs and our thoughts around the concept of time.
Okay. All right. We're digressing, talking about the younger generation, though I think you can't not talk about that because I think there's such a large number of 50% of most organizations. So they have a factor in that one. We started with the world of work is different. People are expecting to be managed differently. You've gotten my list of what's different. Just take for me what you focus on that leaders and managers need to be aware of.
Oh, I think the conversations are different. I think the expectations are different. I think in many organizations, historically, we thought of, well, you have your work and then you have your personal life. And what I find fascinating is we thought nothing about work expanding into your personal life. Hey, I want you to take your laptop on vacation. Hey, I want you to dial in for this conference call with Tokyo, even though it's after hours for you. It's after 5, you know, those type of things. And yet, in this age, when personal lives start to creep into the work time, many leaders, many managers are like, no, we can't have any of that. This is unfair. And it's like, well, wait a second. Let's have some balance on the two. I think the expectations for time that someone works in terms of longevity at a job has really shifted. Again, this comes back to watching parents in previous generations work for the same employer for decades. Those days are long since gone. I think if you can get 3, maybe 4 years of fantastic performance out of a team member, you should be thrilled that you got that much. Now, many employers look at this and they say, Joey, that's no way to run a business. Well, that's the way collegiate sports teams run. And we all watch collegiate sports and we look at this and say, I think if you're looking for a role model for a system that seems to be working and seems to be an accurate representation of the workplace today, look to collegiate sports teams. You want to recruit the best talent possible to play within your system, the game you're playing. If they're really, really good, they're going to be there maybe 3 years before they get drafted to go to the next level. If they're good, but not world class, they may play 4, 5, 6 years. Anybody playing more than 6 years, we're looking at them going, well, is that person just not bright? Do we even want that person on our team, right? So I think there's an opportunity to take that same analogy and apply it to our teams. And I think where a lot of leaders are missing out is they're thinking, oh, I'm going to hire this person, and then I don't have to think about hiring someone again for a decade. Right. That's not the reality.
That's not the reality. But we think often about bringing somebody in and needing to train them. And for so many of jobs, the training process takes decade to be really good, to be an expert. How do you help people think about that challenge?
I think there's a balance between, do they want to become an expert? We want them to become an expert, but when somebody first starts a job, they maybe have never worked in that industry before. They don't know if this is what they're going to be interested or not. I mean, would we take a child who took a first math class and they enjoyed it and say, well, I guess you're going to be a mathematician? No, we're adding new inputs. We're adding new perspectives. And I think the reality is we don't fully comprehend a job and the roles and the requirements and the responsibilities of the job until we actually have the job. It's why I'm such a fan of internships and shadowing and giving someone the opportunity before they invest all this time, money, and effort in school and in higher education. Yeah. Go have a taste for what it's like. You think you want to be a lawyer? Go work in a law firm when you're in high school.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until after you're done with law school to realize, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought. This is not what it shows like on TV. Of course, it's not what it's like on TV. Go have the actual experience.
Right. I think that's interesting. I also think it forces us to think about the jobs in less of an apprentice way and in more of a, okay, I need you to do this skill. And you've got this capability, I'm adding this one skill to you. And then 3 months from now, I'll add another skill or whatever it is that allows, we're going to have to think about how we do the work in a different way. All right, let's talk about this retention issue, longevity, because, the adage is, why am I bothering investing in the relationship, the person, their interest, if they're only going to be here 3-4 years? Well, why should I bother? What's your reply to that?
Well, there's this age-old maxim in the world of training, right? What if I train them and they leave? And the argument is, well, what if you don't train them and they stay, right? Yeah. We've all heard that. But I think the element of retention and loyalty is so many employers expect a level of retention and loyalty just because they're providing a paycheck. And yet, ironically enough, they don't match that same retention and loyalty with their behavior.
Right.
So I want the employee to stay for a decade, but I'm an at-will employer and I can fire you on a whim tomorrow. Well, wait a second. Which is it? You're expecting me to give all of my time, effort, and talent to this endeavor, but I could come to work tomorrow and be fired? I know somebody that is a top performer in a national organization. They were number 3 in the country last year as a salesperson, right? As soon as they finish the year, they get ready to start the next year, their manager wants to put them on a performance improvement plan. Mm-hmm. Now stop and think about that. They're the number 3 performer in the entire organization, and their manager wants to put them on a performance improvement plan because the manager is being criticized for one element of the business in their region or territory that wasn't working well. So they're going to put everybody on their team on performance improvement plans to get that one area well. It's like, wait a second. You're going to clip the wings of one of your top flyers to solve for a problem that, by the way, the plan that they're doing is not going to solve for the issue. But this model of, let's solve problems that aren't really problems with tools that aren't really tools by creating expectations that aren't really expectations, but instead are punishments. There's just, it's shocking to me that there have been businesses on this planet for thousands of years, and we still can't agree on some pretty basic concepts and maxims for leading teams.
Oh, we could go deep on this one for a really long time.
We could.
Joy, I'm famous for saying I am shocked that any of my clients make any money based on some of the inefficient things that I see happening in every single client I've ever dealt with. So nobody
and illogical as well. Not only inefficient, but just illogical. Right. I'm like, who on the team thought this would be a good idea to halfway through the year cut the comp plans in half?
Yeah.
To make numbers. Like who thought that was well, that'll help them the balance sheet add up at the end. Oh, great. There are humans this brings us back to where I started, right? Humans are humans are humans. And I think lots of times we have a tendency to stop treating our team members with any shape of humanity and justify it as, well, this is the cost of doing business.
I think there are 2 things that I point to. You can agree or disagree with me. One is we treat humans as if they are output engines. So we get focused on the output. What's the production? How efficient is that production? Can I get it more efficient, etc.? And a lot of the behaviors we've been talking about are really outgrowths of seeing people as an output engine.
I agree.
Right. The second problem that I see is that we put processes in to solve a problem that really should be solved with a very difficult conversation, one-to-one. So we're avoiding that kind of interpersonal conflict, if you will, and we layer a process in. That's an example of your salespeople.
Absolutely. And I would say, building on that piece, Wanda, I also think regularly we treat the other people on our team as if they are the same as us.
Yep.
We presume that, oh, if I'm going to treat you this way, because that's the way I'd like to be treated, that is actually going to work. Instead of saying, how is every team member of my team operating, and how are they seeing the world, and how can we as a result try to model our leadership style to fit them?
All right. So Joey, I was about to say, this is a great time to shift from our complaining about what's going on or dissecting what we think is being missing, and turn instead to what it is we think needs to happen. So for all those lovely, wonderful managers, leaders out there who are feeling overburdened, who would like to get it right, but they're just saying, just to tell me what I need to do, what is it you think we need to do?
I think the first thing we need to do is think holistically about the employee journey. From the first moment that a candidate becomes aware that there is a position available in our organization, up until the point where they are a raving fan, singing our praises far and wide, going on Glassdoor and leaving reviews unprompted. If we've got an open position, they're recruiting the best people they've ever worked with to come apply at the company they work at now. I think when we think more holistically about the entire employee journey, we get very different results in terms of the outputs of our team members and the inputs of the organization in trying to create those outputs.
I have worked with a couple of clients where I have made this same argument, but for very different reasons. One in which they were trying to create a more inclusive culture. They felt that they had a problem with people feeling that they were involved. And if you look at the very beginning, when somebody became aware of the company, the reasons they became aware of the company set up expectations for what it would be like to be there. And those expectations were not delivered. And it's purely because of what was in the press about that particular company. They had to deal with that one.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not even what the press is interpreting is going on in the company. It's our own marketing materials. We say on our website, hey, we have great flexibility of employment. And then you show up and it's like, hey, you need to put in for vacation 8 months in advance. And it's like, wait a second, that's a disconnect between what you were advertising and convincing me why this was a good place to work. Now, again, I'm not saying that you should have policy X about vacation or policy Y about time off. What I am saying is that should be clearly stated before, during, and after the onboarding experience. You should know that before you become an employee. You should know that as you're becoming an employee. And we should come back and remind people about that afterwards, instead of imagining that everything you learned about on day one of your orientation is somehow still in your head 6 months later. It's not. You're human.
Right. Fair enough. And I don't expect people to go to the intranet to go search for it among the 3,000 pieces of information that are there. Okay, so think about the entire employee experience. I often find for employees who are feeling very negative experiences that it's the little tiny pieces in that journey that have added up, not any one egregious broken piece. It's the little dings along the way. So I think that's what you're saying as well. All right, so I want to think about the entire experience from the moment you were aware of the company having an opening to the moment you've said, I'm done with this company, I'm leaving my review on whatever platform you want to leave your review. Okay, then what?
I think once we start to think more holistically about the journey, we need to go through each phase of that journey. And I happen to believe there are 8 different phases in the employee journey. I think we need to go through each phase and say, what are we doing in this phase to create the kind of remarkable experiences that will not only let this person understand our organization, be part of it, be part of a successful onboarding program, but will also propel them to the next phase. I think what happens often is organizations are like, ugh, I just want to teach you enough so that you can be productive and start providing value. And as a result, we skip over the nuance, the bigger picture that lets the employee understand, where do I fit in the process? One of my favorite questions to ask employers, Wanda, is, and I do this, I most enjoy to do this when I have their teams. I'll ask the CEO, does everyone in your organization know how you make money, how you spend money, and how you lose money? And lots of times CEOs are like, oh yeah, it's very clear. It's very clear. Well, then I get the entire organization together and I say, how do we make money here? And I'll get 50 different answers. And by the way, 2 of them are accurate. Or I'll say, how do we spend money? And I'll get a couple answers, but no one understands the full scope of the expenses. And then the real kicker, when I say, how do we lose money? It's like, cue the tumbleweed. No one seems to know how we lose money. And then I look at the financials and I'm like, I can tell why no one knows, because we are leaking out of this bucket left and right because no one is looking for the ways we're losing money. I think so many of the basic elements of being in business are not explained to our team members.
Right. I think it's very difficult in many organizations for a host of valid reasons to understand, even if you're running a P&L, what the real cost is or where the real loss is. But I'm also shocked, like you, when I ask an audience, so who's your top 3 customers?
Yeah.
Like, who's really driving the engine here of your sales? And they look at each other like, I don't know. Could somebody call,
Or even how do we define top customer? Is that customer that provides the largest amount of revenue? Is it customer that provides the largest amount of profit? Is it customer that has been here the longest? Is it customer that is the least headache to deal with? Is it customer that we see the most promise for in the future for growth? Any number of those criteria could be used to define the word top. And yet most organizations haven't even done basic definition classes of how are we going to define the terminology we use within these walls.
Right. Agreed with you. We could go down that road as well. And I'd take any of those definitions. Just give me 3 names and still don't know.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to employees. You said 8 phases. So tell me what the 8 phases are.
I'm going to go through these rather quickly, Wanda, because there's 8 of them. And at any point where we want to dive in deeper afterwards, you let me know. Now, each of these 8 phases starts with the letter A. And the reason is not to confuse anyone, but rather to say, if you get all of these phases right, it's like getting straight A's on your report card. Your employees are loving the experience with you.
Okay.
So the first phase is the assess phase. In the assess phase, a prospective employee or a candidate is considering whether or not they want to come work for you. They're checking out your job posting or your classified ad. They're probably going on your LinkedIn page, the About Us page of your website. They're getting a feel for your culture. They're submitting a resume or an application. They're going through your interviewing process. In common parlance, we call this recruiting. Okay, but I call it the assess phase because I want us to recognize that in the same way that we as the employer are assessing these candidates, they are assessing us. Is this the kind of place I want to work? We then come to phase 2, the accept phase. The accept phase has 2 component pieces. As an employer, we accept that this is the candidate we would like to have join our team. We extend a job offer, and if we're lucky, that candidate accepts our job offer. They transition from being a candidate to actually being an employee. We then go to phase 3, the affirm phase. Now, I'd be willing to bet many people are familiar with the phrase buyer's remorse. What they might not be as familiar with is the phrase new hire's remorse. It is the exact same thing as buyer's remorse, where a newly hired employee begins to doubt the decision they just made to accept the job offer. Maybe I should have negotiated for a higher salary or better benefits or more time off. Wait a second, I interviewed with these people from HR, but I'm going to be working on a team not in HR. I never met anybody I'm going to be working with. I forgot to ask, what do we have to wear to work every day? All these doubts, all these questions, all of these concerns are floating around in this new hire's mind. And in the typical organization, there is zero communication with the new hire between the day they accept the job and the day they show up for the first day on the job. Don't make that mistake. You've got to come in and affirm their choice. We then come to phase 4, the activate phase. This is the first official day on the job, the first real moment of truth. And in the immortal words of country music legend Bonnie Raitt, we got to give them something to talk about. Because we know that new hire, when they get home that night, is going to say to their spouse, their partner, their kids, their parents, their loved ones, whoever it is, when they show up with those folks, those loved ones, the first question they're going to ask is, how was it? How was your first day? As employers, we know this is the question that is going to be asked. And yet very few employers on the planet try to intentionally sculpt the answer that is going to be given. What are we doing to activate the relationship and let them know that working here is going to be unlike any place they've ever worked? We then come to phase 5, the acclimate phase. This is when your new hire gets used to your way of doing business. It starts on their second day on the job and lasts for weeks or months as they get used to the role they play, the responsibilities, the requirements of the job, and the various relationships that they're going to need to maintain to be successful. We then come to phase 6, the accomplish phase. The accomplish phase is in many ways different for every single employee, because in the accomplish phase, that individual employee achieves the goal they had when they originally accepted the job offer. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, their goal was a paycheck. Now, that might have been a minor goal, and of course, you got to pay them. But what did they hope to learn? What did they hope to do? How did they help to grow their resume, their knowledge, their life experience? Did they want to be a leader? Did they see themselves as being here for many years and building a career? Or is this a stepping stone for 2 or 3 years to make some money so they can go back to school? I don't care what they're trying to accomplish. I care that you as the employer know what they're trying to accomplish, track their progress towards that, and then celebrate with them when they achieve that goal. We then come to phase 7, the adopt phase. In the adopt phase, the employee becomes loyal to you and only you. They are committed. They're not going to answer the call from the headhunter. They're not going to cruise job postings when they're home on the weekends. They are bought into your way of doing business. The problem here, Wanda, is that most employers take their adopters for granted. Almost everybody listening has team members who have been with the team for a long time, who are committed, who are bought in, or who are contributing. Are we giving them the time of day? Are we focused on them? Or are we focused on the problem children, the ones who aren't behaving, the new hires, everybody else? No, we can't forget our adopters. And last but not least, if someone has moved through all 7 phases, do we have the right, the privilege, the opportunity to invite them to the 8th and final phase, the advocate phase, where they become a raving fan singing our praises far and wide? They're writing the reviews online. They're giving us testimonials. When we have an open position, they're actively recruiting their friends to come apply as well. So many organizations I meet with say, Joey, we've got a ton of advocates. And I say, great. How many open positions do we have right now? Well, we've got this sales director position we've been looking to fill for 10 months. Folks, you don't have advocates.
That's right.
Because if you had advocates, your internal team would have already brought you the candidates to fill it. You may have adopters, people that are loyal and are committed, but they're not advocates. Last thing I'll say on these 8 phases, because I know that was a whirlwind review. Every time you promote someone, they go back to the beginning. And here's the kicker, Wanda. Most organizations pay 0 attention to the onboarding of a newly promoted employee. We say, well, because you were good at sales, you'll probably be a great sales manager. So we make them a sales manager with no training, no support, no understanding, and we throw them into the pool and are like, do your best to swim. And they're drowning. And we're thinking, well, they've been here for 2 years and they've been a great performer. Yes, but they're in an entirely new role that you need to assess them for, accept them, affirm their decision, activate on the first day. Most people, when they show up for the new role that they've been promoted to, that day is no different than the day before. Maybe they're in a different office. Maybe they get added to more meeting invites, right?
Maybe.
But there isn't anything substantive that has changed in a positive way for them. We got to be thinking holistically about the entire employee journey.
Yeah, we don't even think about what emails that they need to be on, what meetings that they need to be invited in, what's the new network they're going to need to build in this new role. And most of the time, they don't even change their desk, let alone their office. So I think that's a really important. As you go through these 8, what strikes me listening to you, Joey, is how much we think about those 8 from the employer point of view. How is the employer assessing? How is the employer accepting? How is the employer accomplishing? What's the employer's goals for accomplishing? as opposed to what's the employee's experience, interest, desires. That's the real flip.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's fascinating to me, Wanda, and you hit it right on the head there, this is the employee journey, not the company journey. The company journey is totally different, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's good or bad. The customer journey is very different, but irony of all ironies, the customer journey has more parallels to the employee journey than any of the other journeys we might map. And yet we have lots of organizations that have spent a lot of time mapping the customer journey and thinking about new customer onboarding and customer success teams and customer retention. But when I ask those same organizations, what is the parallel version of this planning and this process over on your employee or team member side? Cue the tumbleweed. Oh, we've never really thought of that. I'm not sure
why
what it
should we
is.
bother?
Exactly.
In fact, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, if you think about what goes wrong with where we lose employee engagement, where we lose motivation, where we lose enthusiasm, where we get frustration, where we lose trust in senior leadership, pick any of the favorite questions that you have on your engagement survey that are frustrating you. Go back to these 8 from the employee point of view, and I guarantee you've got a problem.
Absolutely.
So the way we bring people in and their experience. So the assessing part, how many people do I know that are so frustrated with how they got assessed for a new role within their existing company? And the lack of transparency on that is just crazy.
Absolutely. Or even the lack of communication. How often do we say, hey, we're hiring for a new, head of marketing, and 4 internal candidates apply. They submit their resumes, and then they hear nothing. There's not even an acknowledgement of, hey, I received your resume, or, hey, thanks, Wanda, for applying for the job. I think you'd be a great fit. There's no communication. And then what are they left to do? Well, how long do I have to wait before I reach out? Maybe I don't want to seem too excited, but I am excited. And all of this fear and doubt and uncertainty that builds in their mind, this is before we've even done an interview for the job. And it's like so many of these things, we are just causing our own problems as leaders.
Well, or worse, I submitted my resume, I never heard from anybody, and 3 months later, it's announced that somebody else got the job.
Yes. And by the way, I now report to that person. And we're like, and we wonder why people then leave when there's a turnover in what the leadership team is, or a transition in the leadership team. They're like, no, I'm out of here. I was applying for this. It's stunning how simple some of these things are, or how basic they are, but they do require our intentionality.
Right. I want to highlight 2 in here that I think we, as a manager, you can fix. Actually 3 that you can fix directly. So you've just either promoted somebody to a new title or brought them into a new role. And what is it that you're expecting their day one in that new title/role to be about? Design it intentionally. What's going to happen so that they feel good about it? How many times do you get an announcement? Okay, you got this brand new title, say managing director. Great. Congratulations all around. Nothing changes. Like something. So activate. The 5th one, acclimate. Kind of what is it that this person really now needs to do to be successful? The managers who will just stop and say, here are the 30 people I want you to build a stronger relationship with in the next month, because they're going to be critical for your success now. How hard is that? And then accomplish. Not what you want the employee to accomplish, what the employee is looking to accomplish for themselves.
Wanda, I love that. And if I may, and I know you were just giving a hypothetical here, but I think it's a hypothetical that shows up a lot. When you were talking about the acclimate phase, you said, and here are the 30 people I want you to build a relationship with in the next month. That's often the messaging. My response as a newly hired person in that role would be, do I have to do the rest of my job as well? Because now you've just told me that I need to be connecting with more than one person per workday. Because in a work month, that's 20 days. So in 20 days, I need to build relationships with 30 people. That means if I only do one a day, I'm going to get 2/3 done and fail on the other 10. Plus, I still have to do my email. I still have to go to meetings. I still have to deliver on my products. I'm imagining I might also have some old responsibilities still in the position I had before, that I'm closing out accounts or closing out or doing handoffs. And I think so often we expect our team members to fly before they walk. We expect them to immediately jump in and understand everything and be firing on all the cylinders and doing all the aspects of their business, instead of giving them time. And by time, I'm talking about weeks, months, to get up to speed instead of presuming. And I think part of that comes from we try to have them do too much too quickly.
Right. Fair. Okay, so I will make this easier, because if I were the manager, this was what I'd say. Here are the 30 people I want you to know. And I want you to get moving on this in the first 30 days. By moving, I mean send an email to initiate contact. I don't expect you to have become best friends with 30 people in 30 days, but I don't want you to wait 90 days before you've reached out to this person, because that will be a mistake. But
Absolutely.
That definition of what I really meant by it.
Yes. And I think here's the thing. I feel like I know you well enough, Wanda, to know that that's what you would do. The problem is most leaders would just say, here are the list of 30 people you have to have a relationship with to be successful in this role. Get at it. Instead of saying, you've never had this role before. I have had this role. There's 30 people you're going to need to know. Here are the 30 people. Now, with your permission, what I'd like to do is explain why these 30 people are on this list. Then I'd like to give you some insight as to how I might prioritize reaching out to them. Oh, by the way, 4 of these people you don't know at all, I will personally make an introduction. In fact, why don't I host a lunch where you come and they come, and I'll be the bridge maker to connect you to. That way, when you reach out to them after that lunch, you have your own interactions to build on, not just my relationship or your title. Now we're having a very different and intentional conversation about what we're hoping to have that employee do.
Wow. That means I do something as a manager leader. I add to my to-do set, as opposed to chuck it over the transom and hope that people can figure it out for themselves, which I think we often do. But that also comes to part of what I worry about is the managers are so overwhelmed with their own work, their own day job, their own demands, their own success stories, that I'm empathetic.
Absolutely, as am I. And I think the reality is, when you are really good at a job and you have good leaders, they will actually give you more work, not less work, because you're getting it done. And they have a lot of people on the team that aren't getting it done. I think the definition of leader is someone who is regularly checking in with the team on what their overwhelm, on what their load balancing is, on what their responsibilities are, and actually teaching them, okay, you are now at a different role. We need to offload some of these responsibilities. This isn't going to be one of your KPIs anymore. This isn't going to be one of your rocks anymore. I'm going to help you as your leader get some of these things off your plate and give them to other people. And that may mean hiring other people, or it may mean stop doing things. So many things that we do in our businesses, we do them because we've been doing them since '04, and we got to keep it going, right? It's like, does this still make sense to do a weekly report in this day and age where everyone can access a dashboard? Well, maybe not. I'm not saying cancel your weekly reports. What I am saying is be intentional about the deliverables we're asking teammates to make, the events we're asking them to attend, the meetings, the calls, the people that are supposed to be copied on emails or Slack messages or Teams messages. Let's regularly audit our operations to make sure that we're not just creating busy work and additional interactions.
Right. Fair enough. There are also plenty of managers who won't let go.
Correct.
Even though they've been instructed to let go. That's a very different story. And another one for another day and another conversation. All right, Joey, 8 phases that an employee goes through in choosing to work for you that you want to manage as an organization, as a leader and as a manager. It's true whether it's a brand new employee or it's an existing employee in a brand new role or brand new title. Assess, is this the place I want to be as an employee? Accept, am I going to actually take this role or not? Affirm, oh my gosh, did I make a bad choice or not? Activate, what is day one? Acclimate, what is it I need to know to be successful in this job? How are the rules and the engagement and the people and all of that? Accomplish, what am I hoping to get out of this role for myself, I might add, not just for the company's profitability. Adopt, meaning I'm going to become loyal to the manager, to the situation, to the group, to the team. And advocate. I now think this is the best place to work in the entire universe, and I will actively go and recruit my best friends to come and work here.
Exactly.
Okay? It's fascinating. Do that from the employee experience. Even if you don't have an HR department who is doing that, you as the new hiring manager can think about some of those choices and how you make that experience start and run for people.
Well, and Wanda, I would say, if I may, especially if you don't have an HR department. Like, here's the kicker. Everybody thinks, oh, well, once we're big enough, we'll hire an HR department. And those folks will come in, and first of all, they'll do two things. Number one, HR is an acronym for compliance. In this day and age, it is an acronym for compliance. And I don't mean to insult any of our HR professionals that are joining our conversation, but I think what we've done is, with the way we have built in rules and regulations and the role has evolved over years, it's become a cover your tail, compliance type organization, as opposed to who in your organization every morning when they wake up and they're looking in the mirror, brushing their teeth, thinking about their day, the sole thought in their mind is, how can I make this the best place to work in the world? Someone should have that as their primary goal. And when you're a solo entrepreneur, when you're a small organization with maybe 6, 8, 10 people, often that's going to be the CEO or the founder. But once we get to the point where we have middle managers, when we have a management team, that needs to be partially the thought process for every leader in the organization.
Well, Joy, I'm going to contend that every employee's experience is highly affected by the team that they're in, their direct line manager, and their line manager's manager.
Absolutely.
There's an ecosystem there. And if that that small little tribe, if you want to call it that, sometimes that's 100, 200 people in and of itself, that if that isn't working, it almost doesn't matter what else is happening in the organization. So you're always back to that small town level of how is this community operating? And that is down to the leaders and managers of that part to do their place in making this work.
Absolutely.
And I think you'd also advocate, I would advocate certainly, that if I put a little bit of thought in this one, I can do the same thing for somebody else. It's not quite as burdensome. I still have to tailor it for each individual, but it's not completely whole new. And 2, I'm going to get more out of them faster.
Absolutely. Not only are you going to get more productivity, and by the way, this isn't just my opinion, the research shows this. Employees who go through a strong onboarding program, right, who are successfully part of an onboarding program that really focuses on what their experience is and making sure they're up to speed, dramatically increases productivity, north of 70%, dramatically increases retention, north of 70%. So focusing on how are we getting somebody into the role and getting them up to speed has direct impact on the bottom line factors of productivity and long-term retention just by making that investment early in the relationship.
Okay. All right. I have to ask one last question before we wrap, which is, so you started this by saying my best talent is going to be 3, maybe 4 years. My average talent, I may get 6 to 8 years, but my best talent, 3 to 4 years. How do you justify all this effort for only 3 to 4 years?
Because it's the practical reality of the world we live in. So yes, do you want to be in business? This is what it takes. Somebody might say, how do we justify spending money on internet? Well, in this day and age, you have to spend money on internet to be in business. Like that is the ante up chips to sit down at the game and play. If you don't want to make investments in your people, I can get out a stopwatch and clock how much longer you're going to be in business. I'm not saying you have to do this. I recently had a conversation with a bunch of CEOs, right? A small group, 30 CEOs. And one of the CEOs who, for context, had been CEO for more than 35 years said, Joey, I don't want to have to do all this new stuff. And I said, and I'll change the name to protect the guilty here. I said, John, I can appreciate that. Then your option is to retire. That's your option. And from a place of empathy, not from a place of judgment, I get that you may not have signed on for all of this, but you don't get to lead in this day and age unless you've signed on for this. It's the same way that the people who were, digging their heels in the ground and saying, we're not going to use telephones. This is ridiculous that we have phones. No, those businesses aren't in business anymore. We have to evolve with the times. We are being called, and we often think nothing of asking people to evolve with the times when it comes to technology investments. Oh, you've got to have a phone. You've got to have a fax. You've got to have the internet. Yes, there are plenty of organizations that are like, I can't believe we're spending so much money on technology, but they recognized it as a necessary investment to continue to play the game of business. The investment people are being asked to make today in a way that they've never been asked to make in the history of humanity is an investment in the members of your team who are giving of their time and their talent to contribute to your treasure as an organization. These are the rules. They're not my rules. These are the rules of the game we're playing now.
I love it, Joey. I often think if we got focused on the cost of a disgruntled employee and we put a number on the dissatisfied employee, they're leaving, recruiting a new person, lost productivity while they're there, reputational factors. I mean, a whole bunch of, if you put a cost number on that, you'd go, oh my gosh.
It's staggering. I mean, in fact, the research shows just two quick data points. Number one, the estimated cost of employee turnover in the United States alone is over $1 trillion annually. If an employee leaves and you have to replace that employee, in the typical organization, it is going to cost you somewhere between 100 and 300% of that employee's salary to fill the role before you start paying the new person, right? So you've got a $50,000 employee annually who leaves. It's going to cost you somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000 to replace them. So one of the things I encourage leaders to do is when they're thinking, do I really want to invest all this time? Ask yourself, do you have $50,000 laying around to not invest the time?
Yeah.
Because if you do,
employee.
fine, per employee, keep behaving this way. If you don't, think differently.
I love it. Imperative. Like it or don't like it, this is the new world. You want to stay in business. You're going to invest in technology like GPT chat or whatever, chat GPT, whatever it is that you're going to invest in, you're going to invest in employees if you're going to stay in business today. Joey Coleman, I love it. The book is called Never Lose an Employee Again, or if you prefer, Never Lose a Customer Again. They're tightly related. 8 phases. Think about it from the employee's journey experience. Joey, how should somebody reach out to you if they want to be in touch?
Wanda, the best place to find me is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, Coleman, Coleman, joeycoleman.com. There you'll find information about keeping your customers and keeping your employees.
Great. I'd love the conversation. Join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone, and leave us a comment on our website, outofthecomfortzone.com. See you next week.